So thank you all for taking time today to come learn about the AZ-HSI Consortium evidence-based practices. My name is Carla Cruz Silva. I serve as the Associate Director for Hispanic Serving Institution Initiatives at the University of Arizona. And then my co-presenter, Erica, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Erika, she, her pronouns. I am the graduate assistant for the AZ-HSI Consortium, and I'm also a PhD student at the University of Arizona.
And we are lucky to have one of the co-founders of the consortium here with us today. So Marla, if you want to quickly introduce yourself as well.
Yes, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Marla Franco. I serve as the inaugural Assistant Vice Provost for Hispanic Serving Institution Initiatives at the University of Arizona and one of the co-founders of the AZ-HSI Consortium. Thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. So thank you all for being here today to learn a little bit more about the Evidence-Based Practices Committee and the application that we have open currently. This is a technical webinar, so we'll spend a little bit of time just explaining a little bit more about what exactly is this Evidence-Based Practices. And then we'll actually review the application, the form, so that you all can start gaining an understanding of what kinds of questions are being asked in the form. And then, of course, any questions you have. So feel free to drop questions in the chat as we're talking, especially if you're like, oh, I have a question I don't want to forget, or feel free to wait. You know, we have definitely dedicated some time at the end to answer any and all questions you all may have. So we're going to go ahead and get started.
So first, we want to share some background about the AZ-HSI Consortium. And so it launched in 2021, and the AZ-HSI Consortium has the goals of seeking to strengthen the individual and collective capacity of Arizona HSIs to essentially support the conditions necessary for Latinx student success in Arizona. Most recently, we did have the AZ-HSI Summit, which some of you might have been at. And this is where we're collectively engaging in professional development. And then the next stage where we're here now is to support the exchange of evidence-based practices and culturally relevant practices that facilitate the success and transfer of Latinx students within the Arizona universities. And so the purpose then of the evidence-based practices is to create a community-informed process to identify, review, catalog, highlight, and share evidence-based practices within Arizona HSI context, known to effectively move the needle towards greater college access, persistent retention, transfer, degree attainment for Latinx students in the state. And one of the things we love to highlight is this process is made by us for us. One of the things we love to highlight is that everybody that was part of the committee represents and are part of leadership within the Arizona HSIs or within institutions around the state that really came together to create this process that it's informed by us for us and like could really launch us to really transform the state for Latinx student success. And it's also to maximize the dissemination of evidence-based practices throughout the state.
Awesome. Thank you, Erika. So some of the goals in the evidence-based practices and what we're hoping to document is to, one, create a process for determining, quote unquote, what works for Arizona HSIs, right? So thinking about being in Arizona, geographically where we're located, politically, you know, what's going on in our state. So really specific to the needs of the students, staff, faculty at Arizona HSIs. Two, it's to inform education, community leaders on what practices optimize Latinx college student success. Three, to highlight and then amplify these practices that produce positive student outcomes with culturally validating environments. And four, to illuminate continued gaps and opportunities for advocacy and investment. So again, it's both, right? What are we doing exceptionally great at? And then what are the things that we still need to work on at our institutions? And how can we learn from each other? So I'm not going to go through everybody's names. Some of them are actually here today with us. So it's really exciting, but this is the committee for the evidence-based practice. And so Erika kind of highlighted this a little bit just a few moments ago, but we are a collective made up of the different institutions of higher education within Arizona. And I'll keep this up real briefly, but these are the different folks that have come in and worked the last few months to really create a process that we felt works best, for folks at Arizona HSIs. And there are other ways to get involved if you are also interested in getting involved with the committee that we will share at the end.
And so one of the things when we began to engage with how do we start planning or working towards building evidence-based practices is we wanted to dive into the literature of what is out there about HSIs. And one of the things that we found was with Garcia, Nunes, and Sandstone about the frameworks of that influence servingness. And so this was like our guiding framework of how we were going to approach this work and the different the different points that we see where evidence-based practices can be talked about, discussed, initiatives can also be brought up. And so this was really what was guiding us in creating this application and also seeing what are the different avenues to look at evidence-based practices and initiatives that are taking place within HSIs in the state of Arizona.
Okay, so now we're really getting into the meat. What is this application? What is this form that we've been talking about? So we're going to review the actual application, but just so that you get kind of that larger bird's eye view of it, there are a few sections. And so, of course, our first section is contact information and institutional overview. The second section being program and initiatives overview. So that's the piece where it's specific to maybe a program or initiative that you are letting us know is an evidence-based practice. So this is where we'll ask questions like the mission, the goals, history, and any core activities, as well as description of the participants that you are serving. 3 is the evidence of impact, right? So what are some of those outcome data, participation data, or your assessment approach? 4 is that centered on servingness, and 5 is institutional support or the funding source. And so in the next portion, I'm going to actually pull up the actual application and I'm going to go through each one of these just so that you all get a better sense of what is being asked of you when you're submitting this application. And like I said before, if you have questions, please feel free. Erika will be monitoring the chat as well as some of the other folks from our committee. So if you have questions as we're reviewing this, let us know, and Erika will definitely stop me so that we can address those questions as soon as they come in over the chat, or again, you can always wait till the end. I'm going to go ahead and pull up. Sometimes it's funky. Can you all see the application? Do I need to stop sharing? No, okay. I was like, I know that happens sometimes with the share feature. So I'll stop sharing and then share my screen again. Okay, so you should be able to see a green screen now. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So here is the application. And so the first part, that core part at the top is really what we just discussed. What's the point of this? Why should I do this? And so here we let you know again what we talked about with our goals. And then something we'll also review at the end, but it is in here. You can see, if the program I submit, the initiative I submit is deemed evidence-based practice, here are some of the different ways that we will then work with you. So, we're working to amplify not only through us speaking with each other, but then through social media platforms. We are going to be hosting a webinar series based on each practice. So you would get the chance to go on our webinar series and talk about the program or initiative. Erika also talked about the AZ-HSI Summit. We just had our inaugural one this year, and we're already gearing up to start planning for next year. And so folks whose practices are deemed evidence-based will then have priority in either sitting on a panel or presenting during next year's summit. And then our AZ-HSI website will house a database that has these evidence-based practices, which is a great way for folks to be able to go back and look through, or reach out to you or try to create something similar, or just talk about it. So the submissions are open currently, and those are due by November 18th. So anybody who wants to submit something, that would be the date. And then we'll let you know by December 18th whether or not the program or initiative you provided was deemed evidence-based. So I'm going to scroll through. So this first part, which is part number one that I talked a little bit about earlier, is really just that primary contact. So whoever is submitting this program or initiative, this is where we're asking you to just give us general information, your name, title, email address. We want just some, basic understanding of your institution. So what year did your institution become an HSI, as well as institutional type. So here you see we've got a number of types. And we also know that maybe we missed some. And so we do have an option for other. You can click as many as you need. And then if there is another descriptor of your institution that you want to let us know, you can stick that in other. So section 2, this is the overview. And so in this one, we ask a number of kind of just general overviews. So as you can see, there's some max word limits. And so a lot of this is to mirror, there's a lot of applications or forms that folks are filling out. And so how can you best tell us about your program, your initiative in, a concise and effective way for us to understand what it is that your program does and how it is evidence-based. So here you can see that we're asking around just, let us know what is the community and the students that you're serving and an overview of your institution. So here is where, those checkpoints, the check all that apply earlier, you would talk a little bit more about your institution. Of course, we need to know the name of your program or initiative, and then we want to know those mission, goals, and history in that 500-word maximum. And that can really be, you're likely going to be working with others, and so maybe you're crafting something together to then put into this form. And then lastly, in section 2, we want to know how you're assessing the impact of your program. And so here we're asking to give us examples of any assessment or data that you might be using. So maybe you're doing pre and post surveys of the students you're serving. Maybe you've done some kind of focus group. Maybe you've interviewed students, right? And so there's an array of ways that you might be assessing the program. It could also be things like retention numbers, graduation numbers, transfer numbers, what percentage of those students. And so really this is where you would kind of give us a story to understand that assessment piece. Then section 3 is we're calling student impact. And so here we're asking you, this is a little bit more of the nitty-gritty specifics with students. And so here we put a list together asking to pick, from these different larger portions. So enrollment, retention, completion, transfer, grad school pathways, career readiness. And so which one does the program or initiative that you are submitting for, where does it kind of fall into this category? And you can definitely pick more than one. It is up to you. We know that sometimes, I know that when I've had to fill out different forms, sometimes I'm like, kind of meets 2. So if it meets 2, you want to put 2. If you want to do 1, it's really up to you. But then whatever you pick up here, so from these that you pick, then we ask for specific examples. So here we have, please share the population demographic of the students you serve. So now you've told us, so can you tell us, are they first-year students, transfer, first gen, Pell Grant eligible, gender, can you give us a little bit more details on that, the specific demographics of the students that you serve? Then once you've given us those examples, can you describe in greater detail the ways that the various ways your student participants reflect the population of your institution? So here what we're really asking is, maybe you serve 100 students. Okay, given their different demographics, how does that reflect the population of your larger institution, right? Like the whole institution. From those areas that you picked, we're also asking you to describe the evidence. And so we did, leave this broad because we want you to have, however you collect evidence through your data, through your storytelling, to let us know, okay, so what is the impact? So maybe your program has been in existence for 50 years. And so you can give us some, numbers on the program has existed for 50 years. It served 5,000 students in that time, so give us some of that impact, those numbers as well. And then again, similarly, still on the same line of what categories did you choose? We then also ask you to provide a description Oh, sorry, that one was on double. Nice. What is it about your program that's centered on serving this? So going back to what Erica kind of talked about with the frameworks, maybe you've heard of that framework, the one by Garcia, Nunez, and Senson. Maybe you're using a different framework in the work that you all do. So it's really about, every institution's going to be different because the way that we serve students needs to be different given the type of institution. And so how is that program centering that servingness piece of your Latinx and Hispanic student population? We also want to know, how's your institution supporting this program or initiative, or how is it affirming this work? So you can see the next question is asking about, is it grant funded or not? And then we also ask if it is, where is it funded from? But maybe your institution affirms your work in different ways. Maybe it is funding, maybe it's supporting in events, right? And so there are different ways your institution or area, larger areas, affirming the work. And so we just want to learn a little bit about what that might look like. Again, we know many programs for HSIs are grant funded. So if it is, we just want to know yes, no, and then if it is funded by a grant, just let us know which grant, right? There's many out there. There's NSF, Department of Ed. So really just letting us know where your funding is coming from. And then we're also asking again about any assessment tools that you might use, right? So what are you using to assess your program? And then the last question we have is just, we know the reality is that COVID has impacted so many of our students, but also the ways in which we are interacting, engaging, checking in with students. And so the last question is optional, but if you feel compelled to, let us know how COVID-19 has impacted your program or initiative. Maybe it shifted the ways that you do things. Maybe it's shifted numbers for you, right? Maybe it's shifted a lot of things. And so we just want you to share as much information, up to 500 words, of what has maybe changed for you and the way that you all are serving students. So I'm going to pause real quick because I know that was like so much information thrown at everybody at once. So maybe just check in and, if you want to throw a question in the chat or you want to unmute yourself, I'll give us like a few seconds to see if anyone has any questions. Not right now. Okay, that's okay. We're not done yet. So let me go ahead. I'm going to pull us back together. So just, and maybe it's a little easier when the screen isn't being shared. So just to take the pulse, if anyone has questions. Yeah. Okay. All right, so no one has questions yet, and I get it. Sometimes it takes us a little bit to see what's going on. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to again just share the timeline, and then Erika will share about other ways to get involved with the committee. So. Okay, so I know I mentioned this, but again, to submit an evidence-based practice program initiative, that submission deadline is November 18th of this year. And then we will let you know within that month, so by December 18th, whether or not a program or initiative was deemed an evidence-based practice. You all will share in a minute, but all of this information is on our website. And so we'll give you the link to that as well, so that you have that to look at. And we already kind of mentioned this, but again, the dissemination of this strategies. So again, if your program or initiative is deemed AZ-HSI evidence-based practice, these are the ways in which we're going to be sharing out what your program is, how it's serving students, and centering that servingness piece. So again, we will host a webinar series in the spring. There will be a database and on our AZ-HSI web page, prioritization at future summits, and then sharing this information with the consortium funders, different institutional leaders, policymakers, community members across the state.
All right, and another thing we want to highlight too is how we really want to center how this is for us, by us. And so we do have a call out for reviewers. And so the call out for reviewers is for volunteers to review the application submissions. So if you're interested, please feel free to follow our link that we also have on our website and volunteer to be a reviewer. Your insight matters, and we would love this to be a process where we get to evaluate what is within our state, what programs are existing out there. And so here's a timeline for reviewers if you are interested in being on the other side of the application process. We ask that you complete the review form by November 14th. And then after that, you will be sent rubric information, the application submissions, and you'll have time to review that and send it back to us by November 21st. We'll send it out, sorry, for November 21st. And then we would like all that information back from you, your review, your evaluation by December 12th. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, feel free to drop it in the chat, and also feel free to reach out to us later in this week and the coming days if any questions come up or if you want to be involved in different capacities.
So here are some of the links, and we'll drop them in the chat as well. Marla just posted our website, which is this bottom one. And so that one has all the information we share today, as well as then links to both the actual form. So when you're nominating or submitting a program or initiative to be reviewed as an evidence-based practice, that's the form that we went through. And then the second link, which is also on our website, is the call for reviewers. So what Erica just talked about, there are many ways to be involved, and being a reviewer is definitely one of them. I know that when I've served as a reviewer, it has really helped me in thinking about how to sometimes apply or submit a nomination in future years. So it is great professional development as well as networking, because you will get to interact a little bit with folks from across the state. But again, that link that Marla dropped in the chat is the one that will then get you to the rest of the links, but I did want to share this one just in case. And so that is our presentation. That is really what we're sharing. So now we really just have time for questions. And so I'm going to stop sharing screen. And if folks have questions, definitely feel free to unmute yourself or to drop it in the chat. And then I also know that we've got some of our committee members here. So if any of them would like to add anything, that would be great as well. Well, if no one has questions, that's totally okay. Erica, do you mind dropping the Gmail in the chat? And so Erica's going to drop our Gmail. And so if you do have questions when you're filling out maybe the form, possibly the reviewer form as well, you're welcome to shoot us a quick email, and we're happy to get back to you with any questions. This is really just the opportunity for us as folks who work at an Arizona HSI to share the knowledge. While we may work in the same state, right? Sometimes we may not be connected to each other or know what other institutions are doing. And so this is a great way for us to connect and to see what's going on and what's working, right? So that we can maybe find ways to collaborate or to do something at our own institutions to continue serving our Latinx and Hispanic students in the state. And so I hope that you all will consider submitting either a program or initiative that maybe you oversee, or maybe just nominating, or putting some whispers in folks' ear of, I went to this webinar and I learned about this new evidence-based practice, and I think that you should submit. And so it's a great way for you all to also, tap other folks that you are working with or that you know of who's doing some great work, so that we can make sure to highlight them and all that they are doing. So Erika and I will stick around in case folks have questions and want to ask them. But other than that, we really appreciate you all taking the time to come today and to learn a little bit more. Like I mentioned earlier, this presentation was recorded. So we will be posting it on our YouTube. And so we can post that link on here, but we'll upload that within the next few days. So if you want to if you want to, again, look through it or watch the video or send it to someone that you know, we would appreciate that. And so let me drop the YouTube link in the chat. And so that is where it will be posted. But other than that, thank you all for taking the time to come to our webinar. And I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, but we'll stick around just in case anybody has questions. But thank you all.